Yes. Hi, my name's Siu Tang. I am the creative director and founder of the creative agency called the Orange Blowfish. I live and work in Shanghai. I've been here about 15 years now. Probably tell from the accent. And my parents are both Hong Kong Chinese, but they immigrated to the UK. I was born and raised there. And then, coming from a very traditional Chinese family, my parents were very much like, go be a lawyer, a doctor, you know, the traditional, kind of stuff that they want you to be an accountant. And I was never very good at any of those things. I was always struggled with, my attention, I wasn't very good at math. So, when I studied business studies, it seemed like a sensible thing to do. And then after university, I got into sales. I was very good at kind of just communicating. So I kind of fell into headhunting, and I was actually a recruiter for a technical recruiter for 9 years in one company. And people I was recruiting was actually architects and engineers. I ended up working, doing some charity work for Habitat for Humanity, that was started by Jimmy Carter. An amazing work they do where, help impoverished families to help build their homes, and give them, interest-free loans. And I went to Cambodia and, just to help somebody and build home and do something with your hands. It was just really inspired me. And I came back to Shanghai, a few weeks later. And I was walking down Waihai Road, walking past the Apple store, and I had that kind of epiphany moment, which I think we all do when we want to go and pursue something that we're passionate about is, do I want to be doing this job, headhunting for the rest of my life? This isn't what I was kind of built to do. I think, you know, I fell in love with Andy Warhol's work around the same time as when Pulp Fiction came out. And there was that speech where Samuel L. Jackson talks about, do you want to be a sheep or do you want to be a shepherd, or are we the wolves? And I think Andy Warhol kind of perfectly understood this meaning of, mass consumerism, where brands control us. We were looking at commercial art, and that's when we kind of popped up with Andy Warhol, and he kind of walks this fine tightrope where it's mass produced artwork. His studio was called The Factory, you know, and I just was just amazed by how he pumped out all of this crazy, insane kind of artwork. At that time I was like, okay, I'm just going to share whatever I do, and I was just, sketches, everything, and they weren't very good to start with because nobody starts off amazing, but I just worked at it, and every day on I'd publish the good and the bad. And so I published everything. And then after, a few months, people started reaching out and saying, wow, I love the stuff you're doing. I was contacted by magazines to do articles and do illustrations. And I would just say yes to everything. So I did all of this work and started to get some recognition. I think that, I think is really relevant right now is, the experiential part of design. And so I was doing these crazy installations, all by myself at the time, and working from my our spare bedroom because we'd just given birth to my wife just given birth to our first child, my son. Yeah, and I was working in the spare room, building all these things, designing all this stuff, and then it kind of took off, and it just kept going and growing the business, getting more experience. And I think that's how we all start, right? You don't know what you want to do, but you're passionate about it, and so you keep going and keep going. And 13 years later, here we are. So there's four of us to start with, and then we grew the company now with 15 people. Yeah. So it's been crazy really to kind of have the business grow from, just me painting in a spare room. Really interesting from, talking to you and really thinking about, the art piece, which I think was a great question, by the way, because it kind of, I think that's the bombastic side of the Andy Warhol side of the creativity that I love to see. I want to be bombarded with color and all this energy. Whereas, the project you've got on screen, this is for architects. But sometimes, I stop and I'll take a picture just of like say these sunlight through trees. And this one, I'll show you like here on my phone. Well, that's all it is. It's just blurred sunlight. I would just take these as I'm riding my bike around the city. And, one of these, and this was probably 3 years before that project. So we came up with this idea to design this 2 meter sun sphere, this huge sun sphere, which would rotate. And then as you walk through, there would be these kind of, we call these glass trees, and these columns would light up as you walk through this glass forest. And then every 30 minutes, that sunsphere is on a electrified track, and it would rotate. So it would create all these shadow effects of light landing onto the ground. So, it really is a piece where, you have to be there for a while. You have to stand there to really admire it and see the effects. So again, that was really hard. We had a fog machine, which was like a mist machine that would create this kind of scented cloud that would float through. So prior to people entering, there was a sensor outside. And I think it was around 20 steps. As you walked around, you trigger the sensor and the cloud would be kind of dispersed. So when you go into the space, the cloud would already be there, kind of lingering. And then as you walk through, there was LiDAR sensors, a lot of sensors, the LiDAR sensors above each of the kind of glass tree trunks. And so as you walk past these mirrored tree trunks, a light would light up inside, and then it would reveal the new clothing collection. I've always got a very good memory for the visual. So even though I took the picture 3 years prior to this project, it was just something that was just, it was just, burned into my retinas. I just remembered this image. And so I just went about, I want to recreate this moment because it's, they wanted, Architects is an outdoor clothing brand, but they had a new line of clothing called System A, which is more about urban outdoors. So how do we create this urban outdoors? Indoors in a shopping mall space and still feel honest to the brand, but also different and honest to the space we're in, because we're in a shopping mall, we're not outside, so we can't bring in the forest. But what we couldn't do is bring in this experience of being in the forest, but in a more abstract way. And this is for another sport brand, Colon Sport, originally from Korean Nylon. It was actually the name, and then they shortened it to Colon Sport. And they wanted to do a pop-up which kind of celebrated wintertime. So we wanted to do something a little bit more playful, where we kind of take people to see the Northern Lights. Originally, we designed this to be an enclosed space, but due to regulations for the shopping mall, you can't have the fully enclosed kind of airship. We had to design it so that it had these kind of ribs on there, which again, ended up being this beautiful structure. They made out of wood first, wood timbers, and then they clad it with the steel sheets. And it was just, to see it in the factory. I've actually got these beautiful pictures I can try find for you, Eric, where you kind of see some of these designs, people, real craftsmen working on it to build it and then put it into place. If we look at our jobs and our roles and what defines us, in terms of titles, we're always looking to categorize ourselves. You're an architect, you're an interior designer, you're an interior architect, you're a landscape architect, you're a UI designer, UX designer, you're a graphic designer, illustrator, sculptor, and there's all these titles that we kind of give ourselves. And when I think back to quite a while back, 500 years, we didn't have titles. You were just creatives. When I say 500 years, there's one guy who was doing it all. He was doing scientific innovations. He was inventing, engineer, and he was a good painter as well, Leonardo da Vinci. Renaissance man, we called him, a Renaissance creative. And I feel that's where we've kind of got a little bit out of touch with our own capacity to go cross discipline. And so I think it's that curious mind and that curious nature that really helps us to deliver brands that are on. And that's what I would say to everybody who's going out there, and want things and projects that really resonate and tell deeper stories, is to go out and question everything. Before I actually quit headhunting, I would sculpt on planes. I know this seems weird, right? These are the things I would sculpt, and I love comics. So I'd sculpt things like this. And this is Wolverine. And then a client of mine, we did some work. They were really happy with the work, so they gave me a 3D printer as a gift, and sat in my office for a while. I didn't do anything with it, and then it ended up learning how to sculpt digitally using my iPad. And one thing that I'd always wanted to do was a series of lucky cats. So I started to sculpt these lucky cats. And this was one of the first ones I did with a little yellow pencil, and then 3D printed it because you can, design and then print overnight. I did one Star Wars one, which is somewhere else. It didn't look very good, so I resculpted that. And this has only been going for since May the 4th because of Star Wars. May the 4th. May the Force be with you. May the 4th be with you. So this has only been going for just over 2 months now. When we think about these Renaissance creatives, and you think about Da Vinci, he was just interested. He just had a curious mind. And he wasn't commissioned sometimes for these things, but how do you get commissioned to do something that you're passionate about? You have to go out and do it yourself and test it and see if it works. Because if it doesn't work, then you know as well, right? And so, here at the Orange Blowfish, and we're always encouraging creatives to explore and do small projects. Where I was given a set of Pantone color cards, 100 postcards. And actually, I do this all the time, which is just a 10 by 10 centimeter square of white card and just coloring that in to do something interesting. And this one was, I got given these for Christmas. So every day I sat down and I'd ask my children over breakfast. So some of the words are booger. What's this word here? Treats. And I would ask them for a word and I would just do a typographic treatment each day, television, and just doing 100 days of just doing a word each day, sleeping in, and just working on stuff just to do something a little bit more fun. Again, I think we set ourselves a lot of boundaries as creatives, as human beings. Oh no, I can't do this. No, I'm a grown up. This would be inappropriate. Um, but I think you have to you have to allow yourself to play. You have to allow yourself the freedom to be a child again and just enjoy stuff. I'm sure you do this, and I'm sure a lot of architects do this, Eric. You go to a building, you just touch the walls, right? I go to a lot of exhibitions, I get told off all the time, like, you can't touch this. Jeez. There's no chain on your ankle at the table, right? But we kind of automatically, instinctively go, I'm here for work. I'm going to sit here and do my job. But your job isn't to sit here. It's actually to go experience. And that's what made the designs more interesting, right? As I said before, I talk to a lot of clients and we ask them a lot of questions. Imagine if I said, no, 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 no. You just sit there and look at the computer and figure it all out. And you'd get nothing. And I think that's, just allow yourself to play, go out and enjoy. And that makes the design deeper. To be able to create is such a gift. Do you know what I mean? That we really do need to feel lucky and blessed. And how do we get to share that more with the world? And how do we find our own voice? That's a hard part. But it's also, that's the fun in discovering that